For more, we can speak to Tim Dawson, Deputy General Secretary of the International Federation of Journalists. Hello to you, Tim. Thank you for speaking to us.
Hello.
Needless to say, it's been a tragic war for journalists, notably since the war in Gaza. Deadliest conflict in recent memory for journalists. It's also been a casualty of press freedom. Tell us more.
Well, there are lots of things about the Gaza conflict that are unusual. Obviously, for the entire population of the enclave, they have been trapped in an area. Most humans' reaction to bullets and bombs is to run from them. That hasn't been possible in Gaza. But what has happened to journalists in Gaza is something, again, as your reporters said, something slightly over 100 have lost their lives, which has been perhaps 6 times the mortality rate of the general population. Uh, why it has been so high is hard to know. We know that it's been Israeli missiles and bullets that have killed journalists. I guess the question that hangs in the air is whether that has been deliberate and whether that has been something that they have designed to do. We do know that the Israeli Defense Force has very sophisticated surveillance technology and AI targeting technology and technology that tries to sort people who they consider to be legitimate targets, which allows this to be done far, far quicker than has ever been possible before. I think that when this conflict comes to an end, there is going to be quite a reckoning. My hope is that this will have the very intense consideration of the International Criminal Court. I think, the allegations, the very strong allegations that hang in the air, need to be tested in a judicial environment, and where appropriate, people need to be held to account.
Yeah, so one question, why has that death toll among journalists been so high? Another question, why hasn't there been more international outrage about it?
Well, believe you me, I've been trying to stoke international outrage for as long as this has been going on. Um, I, I, I think the level of interest in it varies. I think there have been times when, you know, journalist deaths have been reported at one or two every day, and interest has picked up. I think 7 months in is very difficult to sustain interest. But when you look at what's happened, there is no question it is absolutely shocking. Um, we know that many journalists have lost their lives in their homes. We know also that the conventional understanding of these tracking devices is that you follow people's mobile phones and you can work out where they spend the nights. And bombs are specifically targeted to those places. One result is that many have also lost their families who were also at those homes. So I think, I think the outrage is growing. It's also, of course, notable that the international reporters haven't been allowed in. Now, again, one can speculate at why that is. We know that many have camped out at the Rafah crossing and have sent angry protests to Israel saying, let us in, we must be allowed to see with our own eyes what's happening. And that hasn't happened. I know that if you ask Gazan journalists, they say that they think they're less likely to be targeted if they are working alongside international reporters, and they would very much welcome the international press back in, but thus far that hasn't been allowed.
Yes, and that suggests two things, doesn't it? One, perhaps a respect for international media that Israel might observe. A second thing is that some people have been suggesting a racial component to this, and that maybe the life of a Palestinian journalist, in some eyes, is not worth the same value of a journalist from another region of the world.
Well, I hope that hasn't been people's attitudes. I think when one sees a huge number building up, it becomes, people move through initial outrage to feeling they can do nothing and a helplessness about it. I think at heart we all know that every human life is equal in value, and that when we see a death toll on that scale, it's something that we have to pay attention to. Perhaps when things are further away from home, it's harder to focus on them. But the simple numbers of it, I think, are compelling. And as I say, I have been standing on the rooftops trying to get people's attention onto this and to try and focus particularly international bodies that might be able to do something about it onto these figures.
And we're listening, Tim. We have one more question for you. It is World Press Freedom Day. Right now, the headlines being dominated by the campus protests as well as the war in Gaza. What are some of the underreported, perhaps conflict zones or locations where there are a lot of issues about press freedom that aren't getting enough attention?
Well, there's the well-known ones. I think you mentioned, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran are all places which fall a long way short of anything remotely describable as satisfactory press freedom. Yemen, there has been a long-standing and terrible proxy war going on there, in which journalists have been particularly targeted. Which I think should be a matter of far greater concern. But it's kind of 3 or 4 world conflicts down the, down the pecking order, as it were. Mexico has long been a terrible, terrible place to be a journalist because of drug cartels who target those who expose them, and a kind of level of government complacency about it. So, I mean, the sad fact is that you don't have to look very far to find really disturbing situations. And also in countries such as my own, the United Kingdom, we have quite significant issues. We have police forces in front of an information commissioner because they surveilled journalists. We have Julian Assange still in prison and potentially being sent to the United States in a matter of days. So, press freedom is a delicate thing that has to be treasured. And I would encourage people, wherever they are, to give some thought to how we ensure that we have free expression and a free press.